Thank you very much. So I'm here to tell you a little bit about the Seed the Future report that we did alongside Tech.eu and Stripe. It's a deep dive into the European early-stage tech ecosystem. My name's Eamonn Carey. I'm the Managing Director of Techstars in London. I've been a founder, an investor, a mentor in the European ecosystem for 15 years, a number of which grows more depressing every year that I say it. At Techstars, we're the worldwide network that helps entrepreneurs succeed. We've invested in over 1,600 companies around the world. We'll invest in 500 more this year, and we're bullish on Europe. In 2013, we opened in Techstars London, and since then, we've opened programs in Paris, Berlin, Oslo, Munich, Amsterdam, and next year, we will have Techstars Lisbon in partnership with Samapa Next right here in Portugal. And together with our partners from Stripe, who are an internet company building economic infrastructure for the internet, and Tech.eu, the leading source of tech news, data, and market intelligence for the European ecosystem, we decided to look at what's going on at an early stage in Europe. An early stage is a tricky thing, because one market Series A is another market seed investment. So we tried to define it as companies that have raised slightly less than €5 million. And we looked at funding trends by sector and by geography. We looked at trends in crowdfunding, ICOs. We looked at developer trends, and much more besides. Now, I've got about 4 minutes, so I'm going to rattle through some of the key findings, and then I'll tell you where you can download the report to find out a little bit more. For a long time, we've heard that there is a seed stage crunch in Europe, that there's not enough funding for early stage companies. But in the data that we saw, in Q2 of 2015, €400 million was invested into seed stage companies in Europe. In the equivalent period in 2018, we saw over €2 billion going into early stage companies in the European ecosystem. So a huge, unprecedented increase in the volume of capital that's going into companies in this part of the world. And we've seen a growth in the number of seed funds investing as well as growth in the number of people investing from the US, from Asia, and other markets. There's huge excitement about the European ecosystem at the moment. And what's more, when we looked at the data to see the number of deals that are being done, there's been a 5x increase in the amount of funding going into companies, and slightly less than 2x increase in the number of deals being done, which means that there is more companies raising more money than ever before in the European market. Is there anyone here from France? You're going to like this next slide. So when we looked at it market by market, we found that the UK was the largest market for raising funding. About 24.5% of all of the funding raised in Europe goes into companies in the UK. When we looked at Germany, we saw about 12.65% of funding going to companies in that market. But if you look at the graph for France, the amount of capital going into companies in France has increased dramatically over the last 3 years. And we'll take a deeper dive and a little bit of a look at that in a slide in just a minute's time. But France is now the second biggest market for fundraising in Europe. 24.04% of all of the capital raised in Europe is going to startups in France. If we look at share by country, the darker the circle, the more capital that's going into that market. The bigger the circle, the greater the average investment amount that's going into those markets. So if we look at the UK versus France, deals on average are slightly smaller in France than they are in the UK. If we look at Germany, it may account for 12.65% of the total deal volume in Europe, but the average size of deals in the German market is much bigger. But let's look a little bit more closely at that French data. This shows you the increase in funding over the last couple of years, from less than 100 million to over 800 million in Q2 of 2018. And that's a combination of factors. Incredible support from people like Xavier Niel and others with Stachunef and Kima Ventures, successive governments supporting schemes like BPI, France Digital, and many others. And this provides a blueprint for lots of other countries around the world. This shows that you can create a startup nation with the right level of engagement with startups, with ecosystem players, with investors, and others. And we've seen announcements on this stage and others around Web Summit over the last couple of years showing that Portugal and many other countries are starting to adopt the same policies that France adopted, that the UK adopted, and that others have adopted, which means that there's even more growth in store. Lastly, we looked at investment by sector, and it may come as no surprise that fintech is the biggest by far. €2.32 billion was invested in fintech companies over the last couple of years in Europe, the majority of that going to companies in the UK, over a third of the total amount. MedTech companies were in second place, 2.07 billion euro raised by them. Average deal sizes in MedTech are quite a bit bigger than in others, but that's probably no surprise considering how complicated that technology is. This was 3 minutes. It's a 100-page report. So it's a Sisyphean task, trying to squeeze it all into a very short period of time. But I would encourage you all to go to tech.eu/seedthefuture and download the report for yourself. There's way more data broken down by geography, by sector, deep dives, interviews with founders. We even talk about the B word, which I'm not going to mention on the stage here because it's too depressing. But there is a huge amount of data in there for you to take a look at. And let me close by saying that it's incredible to present this data at a conference of this scale in Europe. 15 years ago, when I started my first company, I never thought that we would see anything even approximating this. We now have role models in Europe, companies like TransferWise, Spotify, Deliveroo, and others who've shown us not only how to do it, but that it can be done by companies from the European ecosystem. We can build world-beating companies, grow them, scale them, and do amazing things. We have support from policymakers, from ecosystem builders, and others who want to help your businesses grow and scale. We have incredible founders. I'm consistently amazed and humbled by the founders, the developers, the designers, and others that I meet as I travel around the European ecosystem. We have people who are unafraid, who are building companies, and who have ambitions that are global in scale. So thank you very much for your time. Thank you to Paddy and the team for allowing us to present here. Thank you to my colleagues from Techstars and our partners from TechEU and Stripe. Enjoy the rest of your Web Summit. Take care.
That way.